America has built some of the most beautiful, powerful, and iconic cars in the world. But every now and then, automakers went completely off the rails. From bizarre styling experiments to wild engineering ideas that defied logic, these cars weren't just unusual, they were downright weird. Some were meant to shock, others to innovate, and a few, well, no one's quite sure what the plan was. Today, we dive into the 12 most weirdest American cars ever built. Strange shapes, wild features, and the wonderfully weird side of automotive history. Watch till the end, and don't forget to subscribe.
The 1948 Davis Divan is one of those fascinating post-war oddities that sits halfway between a futuristic dream and a tragic cautionary tale. In the years immediately after World War II, the American public was hungry for anything that looked modern, space-age, and optimistic. Cars, airplanes, and household appliances were all being designed with sleek curves, chrome accents, and the promise of a brighter tomorrow. Into this atmosphere stepped Glenn Gordon Gary Davis, a charismatic promoter with a salesman's confidence and a knack for spinning a compelling story. He promised nothing less than the reinvention of personal transportation, and the Davis Divan was going to be the machine to do it. The Divan's most striking feature was its three-wheel layout, two at the back, one at the front, which gave it an instantly distinctive silhouette. It was wrapped in a smooth, hand-formed aluminum body, with curves that looked more like an aircraft fuselage than a car. This was no coincidence. Davis had purchased a surplus military prototype car called the Californian, designed by Frank Curtis, and reworked it into what he claimed would be America's next great automobile. The front end was sharply pointed, with a rounded windscreen that wrapped almost halfway around the cabin, resembling a WW2 fighter canopy. From some angles, it looked like a streamlined teardrop. From others, like something a Hollywood prop department would cook up for a sci-fi serial. The cabin's most unusual feature was its single sofa-like bench seat, designed to hold 3 passengers side by side, with the driver in the middle. This gave the Divan a social, almost living room-like feel, part of Davis's pitch for comfort and simplicity. The drivetrain, however, was less revolutionary than the styling suggested. Power came from a modest 47-horsepower Hercules 4-cylinder engine mounted in the rear, driving the 2 back wheels through a conventional transmission. Performance was adequate for the era, but Davis claimed the aerodynamic shape and light weight would make the Divan more efficient and more stable than 4-wheeled cars, a claim that wasn't entirely accurate. Owners later admitted that handling could be twitchy, especially in crosswinds, and that sudden maneuvers could unsettle the single front wheel. Still, the driving experience was unlike anything else on the road, and the sensation of sitting in the middle seat with that panoramic view ahead was intoxicating in its own way. Davis's marketing was pure showmanship. He launched a national publicity tour, hired glamorous models to pose with the Divan, and made big promises to potential dealers and investors. He spoke of low-cost production, military-grade durability, and a future in which every American would own a Davis. He even showed off a proposed pickup version called the Davis Jeep, claiming it could replace multiple types of utility vehicles. But beneath the gloss, the company had no large-scale manufacturing capability, no proven distribution network, and was relying heavily on investor money just to keep the lights on. By 1949, the dream had unraveled. Only 13 Divans were ever built before lawsuits from disgruntled investors and unpaid employees forced the company into bankruptcy. Glenn Davis himself was later convicted of fraud, his grand vision sinking into the long list of post-war automotive flameouts. The surviving cars, however, became instant conversation pieces. Owners often recalled how driving one through town would literally stop traffic. As one owner put it, "You could see people's necks snapping to look, half of them smiling, the other half wondering if they'd just seen something from outer space." It wasn't just a car, it was a rolling piece of theater. Today, the divan stands as a beautiful and bizarre artifact of its time, a mix of legitimate creativity, shameless hype, and naive optimism. It's a reminder of how, in the late 1940s, America's roadways were wide open to dreamers, tinkerers, and hucksters alike. The divan didn't change the world, but it left a small, glittering footprint in automotive history. Proof that sometimes the strangest visions are the ones we remember the longest.
The 1961 Amphar Model 770 occupies a truly unique and almost mythical place in automotive history. A car that defied the traditional rules of engineering and marketing by attempting to merge two completely different forms of transportation into a single package. It wasn't the first amphibious vehicle in existence, but it was the first one you could actually buy from a dealership, register for the road, and legally drive to your local lake without needing special permits or military credentials. It was a whimsical, almost childlike dream turned into a tangible product, and in that sense, it represented the boundless optimism of the early 1960s, when it seemed entirely reasonable to believe that cars might soon fly. Boats might drive on highways, and suburban families might spend weekends cruising from road to river without ever leaving their seats. The Amphar was the creation of German engineer Hans Trippel, who had been fascinated with amphibious designs since the 1930s. He had already built prototypes and military amphibians during the war, but with the economic boom of the post-war years, he saw an opportunity to bring the idea into civilian life. Manufactured in West Germany by the Quant Group, the Amphar was a soft-top convertible that looked at first glance like a quirky little European runabout with exaggerated body lines, high-mounted headlights, and an oddly tall beltline. But a closer inspection revealed clues that it was far from ordinary. The pronounced boat-like hull shape, the propeller drive shafts protruding from beneath the rear bumper, and the heavy-duty door seals designed to keep the cabin dry. Under its cheerful exterior, the Amphar was powered by a modest 1147cc four-cylinder engine, sourced from the Triumph Herald, producing just 43 horsepower. That was enough to propel it to around 70 miles per hour on land under ideal conditions, and to a sedate 7 knots, about 8 miles per hour in the water. The transmission was an ingenious dual-road design, allowing the driver to engage the rear wheels for land use or switch to the twin propellers for aquatic travel, sometimes even using both at once while launching from a ramp. Steering was equally unconventional. On land, it used a standard rack and pinion setup, but in the water, the front wheels themselves acted as rudders, which made turning in calm conditions reasonably predictable, but in rough or windy waters rather awkward. The Amphar's dual-purpose nature came with compromises that could never be entirely engineered away. Because it had to float, it had a sealed steel hull, which made it heavy for its size and meant the bodywork had to be absolutely watertight, at least in theory. In practice, the seals were prone to wear, and small leaks were not uncommon, forcing owners to keep a bilge pump handy at all times. Saltwater operation, while technically possible, was disastrous for the unprotected steel hull, and corrosion became the single greatest threat to the car's longevity. On the road, it handled much like a small imported convertible of the era, adequate but far from thrilling. On the water, it was competent in calm lakes and slow-moving rivers, but it was hopelessly outclassed by even modest recreational boats in speed and agility. Despite its limitations, the Amphar found a surprisingly enthusiastic niche market in the United States, particularly among lakeside homeowners and those with a taste for the unusual. It became a symbol of eccentric fun, the sort of vehicle bought by people who valued novelty and entertainment over practicality. Public reactions were one of the greatest rewards of ownership. Spectators on a shoreline would gape in disbelief as an Amphar drove purposefully toward the water, expecting disaster, only to burst into laughter and applause when it bobbed to the surface and began puttering away. Owners loved these moments. One famously quipped that it was the slowest boat and the slowest car I ever owned, but also the most fun.
while another claimed that taking it to a public boat ramp was like performing a magic trick in front of a live audience. The Amphar's production run was relatively short, from 1961 to 1968, with roughly 3,878 units built, and about 90% shipped to the United States. Regulatory changes in safety and emission standards, combined with the sheer expense of building such a specialized vehicle, eventually killed the project. Yet its cultural impact far outlived its commercial life. Today, the Amphar is a beloved oddball in the collector world, fetching surprisingly high prices when restored, particularly if its marine equipment is still fully functional. At vintage car shows and classic boat festivals, it is often the star attraction, with owners gleefully demonstrating its party trick of driving straight into a body of water and chugging away while crowds cheer. The Amphar remains a perfect symbol of a time when automotive design dared to dream big, even if the execution fell short of perfection. It was flawed, slow, and vulnerable to rust, but it was also joyful, daring, and utterly unlike anything else you could buy. More than half a century later, the sight of one making a smooth, unbroken transition from asphalt to open water still feels magical. A reminder that sometimes the most impractical ideas are the ones that stick in our memories forever.
The 1963 Chrysler Turbine car stands as one of the most audacious and otherworldly experiments in American automotive history. A vehicle that, on the surface, could pass for a sleek, early 60s personal luxury coupe, but beneath its elegant bronze bodywork hid a propulsion system so radical that it still feels like science fiction. In an era when the automotive industry was basking in post-war optimism and promising a space-age future, Chrysler decided not to just hint at tomorrow with flashy tail fins or push-button transmissions. They decided to build an actual road-going car powered by a jet engine. The Turbine program had been quietly developing inside Chrysler since the early 1950s, spearheaded by engineers who saw the gas turbine as a potential answer to the inefficiencies and mechanical complexities of the piston engine. Gas turbines, similar to those used in helicopters and small aircraft, had far fewer moving parts, no valves, no radiators, no traditional lubrication systems, and in theory could run more smoothly, last longer, and require less maintenance. Even more tantalizing was their ability to operate on almost any combustible liquid. Chrysler demonstrated this party trick often, with engineers and PR men gleefully pouring kerosene, diesel fuel, peanut oil, tequila, and even Chanel No. 5 perfume into the tank. If it could burn, the turbine would run on it. Externally, the turbine car didn't look like a spaceship. Styled by Elwood Engel, the same man who'd penned the elegant '61 Lincoln Continental, it had clean, formal lines with just a hint of futuristic detailing. The body, hand-built by Ghia in Italy, featured a sweeping roofline, subtle tail fins, and turbine-inspired trim elements, particularly in the grille and taillights. Painted in a distinctive turbine bronze color, it looked dignified rather than gimmicky. Chrysler wanted the car to feel approachable, not alien. But the real theater began when you pressed the starter. Instead of the chug and rumble of a V8, there was a high-pitched whine that climbed smoothly in pitch, a sound more akin to a Learjet spooling up than a car coming to life. Neighbors would step outside to see what was making the noise, and more than one test driver reported people looking toward the sky, expecting to see a low-flying aircraft. The engineering, while groundbreaking, came with trade-offs. The turbine produced a prodigious amount of heat, so much so that Chrysler had to shield the rear bumper to keep from damaging nearby cars or melting asphalt in parking lots. It also had significant throttle lag. The time between pressing the accelerator and the turbine responding could be several seconds, which made quick getaways or sudden lane changes more nerve-wracking than exciting. Fuel economy wasn't as miraculous as promised. Either, while it could drink almost anything flammable, it tended to drink it in quantity. and the exhaust, though clean in terms of emissions, was blisteringly hot. Stand behind a running turbine car, and you could quite literally feel your shins cooking. Chrysler never intended the turbine car to be a full production vehicle. Instead, it was part of an extensive consumer test program from 1963 to 1966. A total of 55 cars were built, with 50 loaned out to carefully selected members of the public for several months at a time. These real-world trials provided invaluable data on reliability and usability, but they also served as rolling advertisements for Chrysler's futuristic vision. Families who received one often became minor celebrities in their neighborhoods, with curious onlookers asking for rides or simply lingering outside to hear the turbine wind up. One participant recalled, "It sounded like the future was landing in your driveway," while another admitted, "The noise was intoxicating, but after a week, my wife begged me to give it back because it made her feel like she was living at an airport." When the program ended, Chrysler, under pressure from tax and import regulations, the bodies were built in Italy, decided to destroy most of the fleet. 46 of the cars were scrapped, leaving just 9 survivors, 2 in Chrysler's collection, and the rest scattered among museums and a few private hands. This mass destruction has only heightened the turbine car's mystique. Spotting one today is an event that even seasoned automotive enthusiasts rarely experience. The Chrysler Turbine car was never going to replace piston engines, but it succeeded brilliantly in capturing the imagination of the public and proving that the automobile could be more than just an incremental evolution of existing technology. It remains an engineering marvel, a museum piece that could still be driven on modern roads if you were lucky enough to have one, and a haunting reminder of a time when car companies had the resources, the daring, and the optimism to gamble on ideas that seemed ripped straight from science fiction. The turbine might have been impractical for daily commuting, but in spirit, it was the embodiment of the jet age. An era when Americans expected tomorrow to sound like a turbine whine and smell faintly of jet fuel.
The 1966 Batmobile from the original Batman TV series is perhaps the most famous custom car in pop culture history. But beneath its flamboyant fins and crime-fighting gadgets lies a fascinating story of ingenuity, speed, and showmanship. Far from being a fragile, non-functional prop, the car was fully drivable and, in many ways, a rolling contradiction. A piece of Hollywood fantasy that could actually cruise down a real highway, even if doing so meant dealing with atrocious visibility, cramped ergonomics, and a level of subtlety roughly equivalent to wearing a neon cape to the grocery store. Its origins go back more than a decade before Batman ever aired. In 1955, Ford unveiled the Lincoln Futura, a wild, one-off concept car designed by Bill Schmidt and hand-built by Ghia in Turin, Italy. Painted in a shimmering pearlescent white and featuring a double-bubble plexiglass canopy, deep side scallops, and massive tail fins, it was pure jet-age optimism. A futuristic vision meant to wow auto show crowds rather than be mass-produced. Beneath the dramatic skin, it rode on a Lincoln chassis with a big V8, and unlike many dream cars of the era, it could actually move under its own power. The Futura spent years as a showpiece before being retired to Ford's backlot, where it languished, gathering dust, and occasionally appearing in background roles in films like It Started with a Kiss, 1959, where it was repainted red. Fast forward to 1965. ABC and producer William Dozier were preparing to launch a live-action Batman TV series. They needed a Batmobile, not in months, but in a matter of weeks. George Barris, already a well-known Hollywood customizer with a knack for turning out eye-popping cars for movies and TV, got the job. Barris already owned the Lincoln Futura. Ford had sold it to him years earlier for a token $1. That existing chassis, with its dramatic lines and bubble canopy, made it the perfect starting point. Working against an absurdly tight 15-day deadline, Barris and his team sculpted and reimagined the Futura into something entirely new, blending the space-age styling of the mid-50s with comic book fantasy and a little hot rod aggression. The body was painted gloss black with fluorescent red pinstriping, massive bat-shaped fins were grafted on, the grille area was reshaped into a bat face motif, and the tail was fitted with a functional propane-fueled flamethrower to simulate a jet turbine exhaust. Inside, the cockpit was a riot of gadgetry. That was the bat phone, the detectoscope, an anti-theft bat ray device, and even a parachute pickup cable for quick 180-degree bat turns, which on TV meant a puff of smoke and a dramatic cut. While many of these controls didn't actually do what the script suggested, enough of them worked to make the car convincing on camera. The flamethrower exhaust was real, the parachutes could be deployed, and the flashing lights, sirens, and onboard electronics were fully functional. Mechanically, the Batmobile retained the Lincoln Futura's Ford 429 V8 and automatic transmission, which gave it enough grunt to cruise LA streets or sprint through TV chase scenes. It was fully street legal, and Barris often drove it himself to promotional appearances. However, driving it wasn't exactly relaxing. The canopy created intense heat inside, visibility was dreadful thanks to the low seating and thick framing, and the extended fins and gadgets made it almost impossible to judge the car's true size. Barris himself joked that the Batmobile was built to be seen, not parked, because squeezing it into a standard space was a circus act. When the Batman TV series premiered in 1966, the car instantly became a cultural icon. Children were enthralled by its rocket exhaust, gadgets, and sleek black and red menace. Adults appreciated its over-the-top design and sense of fun. At public appearances, the car drew crowds that rivaled the actors themselves. Some fans called it the ultimate dream car, the kind you draw on the margins of your school notebook and wish into existence. Critics, however, were less kind. One review famously described it as a melted space fighter from a toy store, mocking its exaggerated curves and comic book flair. Over the years, Barris built multiple replicas for touring and promotional use, but the original, the one that started life as the Lincoln Futura, remained in his collection until it was sold at auction in 2013 for $4.62 million. Today, it's regarded not only as a piece of television history, but also as one of the most famous custom cars ever built, a bridge between Detroit's golden age of concept cars and Hollywood's flair for spectacle. For all its impracticalities, the 1966 Batmobile represents something rare in automotive history, a car that transcended its function to become pure cultural mythology. You didn't just see it, you heard its turbine whoosh, you smelled the faint whiff of propane from its flaming exhaust, and for a moment, you believed that somewhere in Gotham, the Caped Crusader really was on his way to save the day.
The 1970 AMC Gremlin stands as one of the most polarizing and unforgettable cars to emerge from the tumultuous automotive landscape of the early 1970s. AMC, the smallest of the American Big Three automakers, was scrambling to stay relevant in a market increasingly dominated by imports and the growing environmental and economic challenges that were about to reshape the industry. Into this chaos, AMC introduced the Gremlin, a car that dared to defy conventional design language and boldly declared its difference, whether buyers loved it or hated it. At first glance, the Gremlin's design shocks the modern observer with its radical short, stubby rear end, which seems almost haphazardly chopped off, earning it nicknames like the Shoe and the Bathtub. The front end, with a steeply raked windshield and sloping hood, contrasts sharply with the blunt rear, creating a silhouette that many found jarring at the time. Yet, there was undeniable character in the Gremlin's unconventional styling. While the big Detroit automakers were churning out larger, heavier cars with over-the-top chrome and bulky proportions, AMC threw caution to the wind with a compact that embraced minimalism, quirkiness, and economy. It was a subcompact with personality in a segment that was only beginning to take hold in the American market.
Beneath that quirky exterior, the Gremlin was built on the AMC Hornet platform, making it mechanically familiar and straightforward, traits that helped keep production costs down and reliability decent compared to many foreign competitors. Buyers could choose from a range of engines, including the mild 6-cylinder and a spirited 304 or even 360 cubic inch V8, giving the car some pep and making it stand out among other economy cars that typically struggled with power. The V8 Gremlin in particular offered surprising acceleration and muscle car flair in a package half the size of its larger siblings. For many, the Gremlin was the first affordable entry point into V8 power without the bulk or cost of a full-size muscle car. Inside, the Gremlin was a no-nonsense cabin, functional and utilitarian rather than luxurious. But that was part of its charm. It was a car made for the practical driver who wanted economy and performance without paying a premium. And in the early 1970s, that formula found an eager audience amid fuel concerns and changing consumer tastes. The Gremlin's appeal was not just about function. It had a sense of rebellion and fun baked into its DNA. AMC marketed it to younger, hipper buyers who wanted something different from the usual American sedan or muscle car. It was small, nimble, and quirky, a breath of fresh air in an era that was soon to be defined by gas shortages, stricter emission standards, and a slowdown of the muscle car boom. The Gremlin captured a niche of buyers who appreciated its offbeat style and the ability to stand out in traffic, even if it wasn't the sleekest or fastest car on the road. Critics, however, were quick to lambaste the Gremlin's aesthetics and ride quality. Its awkward proportions and chopped tail made it an easy target for mockery in the press and popular culture. It was frequently compared unfavorably to European imports and domestic competitors that looked more polished or offered more refinement. Reliability was decent but not outstanding, and its build quality sometimes suffered from the limited resources AMC could invest. The car's reputation was a mixed bag, and it never achieved the mainstream success of rivals like the Ford Pinto or Chevrolet Vega. Yet for all the criticism, the Gremlin forged a loyal following. Owners embraced its eccentric looks and practical nature, often seeing it as a fun and affordable way to express individuality in a marketplace crowded with safe, predictable choices. Its quirky character made it a cultural icon of the 1970s, an era defined by change, experimentation, and a bit of wildness on the roads. Collectors today prize well-maintained Gremlins not just for their rarity, but for the story they tell about an era when American car makers dared to take risks. The legacy of the Gremlin is complicated but fascinating. It was a pioneer of the subcompact American car, a category that few of the big manufacturers fully embraced at the time. Its bold styling and willingness to break norms set it apart, even as it struggled commercially. In retrospect, the Gremlin is a snapshot of American automotive daring, an imperfect but memorable car that dared to be different in a crowded and conservative market. In the annals of automotive history, the Gremlin remains a beloved, if controversial, emblem of American automotive creativity and resilience.
The 1973 Brickland SV1 stands out as one of the most fascinating, ambitious, and simultaneously tragic chapters in sports car history. Born from a bold vision to create the ultimate safety vehicle, hence the SV in its name, this Canadian creation was designed to revolutionize what a sports car could be, blending striking futuristic styling with innovative safety features that were decades ahead of their time. Yet, for all its promise and avant-garde design, the Brickland quickly became a symbol of unfulfilled potential, plagued by mechanical woes and baffling flaws that made ownership a challenge at best. Conceived by Malcolm Brickland, a passionate entrepreneur with a flair for the dramatic, the SV1 was intended to push the boundaries of automotive design and engineering. Its gull-wing doors alone were enough to captivate attention, dramatic, theatrical, and reminiscent of exotic Italian supercars. They promised easy entry and exit, plus a safety advantage by reducing side impacts. However, in reality, these doors were notorious for mechanical failures. Owners learned early on to carry a hammer or other tools just in case the complex latching mechanisms jammed, leaving them trapped inside
or stranded outside in an awkward predicament. This frustrating quirk quickly became legendary, overshadowing the car's other qualities. The Brickland's body was another marvel and a source of ongoing trouble. Made from acrylic resin bonded to fiberglass panels, a material intended to resist dents, corrosion, and minor impacts, the SV1's body looked like something from a sci-fi movie. The acrylic gave it a glossy, almost plastic-like finish that was both lightweight and incredibly bold. But these panels were difficult and expensive to repair, and any mishap risked irreparable damage. Moreover, the manufacturing processes for these materials were not yet perfected, leading to numerous fit and finish problems and costly quality control headaches. Underneath the striking exterior, however, the Brickland was less remarkable. Powered by a modest AMC source 360 cubic inch V8 engine, it struggled to achieve the kind of speed and nimbleness drivers expected from a sports car with such exotic looks. Acceleration was sluggish, and handling was hampered by its weight and suspension tuning, leaving many owners disappointed when it came to the driving experience. Despite its bold promise, the SV1 felt like a heavy, underpowered Grand Tourer rather than the sharp, exhilarating machine it visually suggested. Compounding these mechanical frustrations were the organizational challenges faced by the fledgling company. Production was riddled with delays, parts shortages, and quality control issues. The factory in New Brunswick, Canada, was ill-prepared for mass production of such a complex vehicle, and these problems led to mounting costs, frustrated customers, and financial losses. By the time production ceased in 1976, only about 2,854 units had been built, making the Brickland SV1 a rare and distinctive curiosity today, but also a cautionary tale about the difficulties of building a car outside the established industry giants. Yet, despite all its flaws, the Brickland SV1 has never lost its cult following. Enthusiasts admire it not just for its radical looks and historical rarity, but also for its bold attempt to rethink automotive safety in an era when safety features were often afterthoughts. It stands as a testament to visionary ambition, the risks of unconventional design, and the gritty reality of automotive manufacturing. Owners often speak of a love-hate relationship with their Bricklands, frustration mixed with pride in driving something truly unique. In many ways, the 1973 Brickland SV1 embodies the spirit of the 1970s automotive world. A time of experimentation, rapid change, and sometimes spectacular failure. It dared to be different, combining style and safety in a package unlike anything else on the road. Though it never achieved commercial success, its legacy endures as one of the strangest, most memorable sports cars ever built, a shining, gleaming dream that was as fragile as it was futuristic. The 1974 Jeep DJ5 postal van is an extraordinary and uniquely American vehicle, embodying a combination of practical ingenuity, oddball design, and cultural nostalgia that still captures the imagination of collectors and enthusiasts today. Developed specifically to meet the rigorous demands of the United States Postal Service, the DJ5 was more than just a delivery van. It was a highly specialized workhorse designed from the ground up to optimize the daily routines of mail carriers across countless American neighborhoods. At first glance, the DJ5 might seem almost comical, a tiny boxy vehicle with a sliding door on the right side, a single driver's seat, and an unmistakable right-hand drive setup. Unlike virtually all other vehicles sold in the United States, the driver sat on the opposite side, allowing for easy curbside mail delivery without the postal worker ever needing to leave the vehicle. This thoughtful but unusual design choice made the DJ5 an instantly recognizable oddity on American streets, especially for civilian drivers unfamiliar with right-hand drive vehicles. In fact, spotting one of these vans on the road was often enough to cause double takes and curiosity from pedestrians and other drivers alike.
Mechanically, the DJ5 was based on the tried-and-true Jeep CJ5 platform, sharing much of its rugged underpinnings, including solid axles, a robust suspension, and a dependable inline six-cylinder engine. This meant the van could handle a variety of terrains and weather conditions, a crucial trait for mail carriers, tasked with delivering letters and packages regardless of rain, snow, or rough back roads. However, the DJ5 was modified extensively to prioritize function over form. Its low-speed maneuverability, narrow width, and the sliding passenger side door allowed for quick stops and easy entry and exit, essential for mail routes with frequent deliveries. What made the DJ5 stand out was its pure utility mixed with an undeniable quirkiness. The van's shape was minimalistic and utilitarian, an angular, no-nonsense box of metal and glass perched on a short wheelbase, more akin to a golf cart than a traditional van. Its tinny construction meant it wasn't the quietest or most comfortable ride, rattling and clattering over potholes and uneven streets. But it didn't need to be luxurious. Its job was to be reliable, efficient, and to help postal workers get their job done swiftly. Interestingly, while the DJ5 was never meant for civilian use, some examples found their way into private hands over the years. These vans, now rare and sought after by collectors, have become prized not for speed or luxury, but for their oddball charm and historical significance. Driving a DJ5 on regular roads remains an unforgettable experience, especially given the right-hand drive layout that feels so out of place in American traffic. Owners often recall how children and passers-by would stop and stare, point and shout out playful comments about the weird steering wheel placement or the vehicle's tiny, peculiar silhouette. The DJ5 also embodies a specific moment in automotive and social history, a time when American automakers and government agencies collaborated to design highly functional vehicles tailored to specific tasks, without concern for style or market appeal. It's a reminder of a more utilitarian era, when cars were not just symbols of status, but tools engineered with singular purposes in mind. The Jeep DJ5 postal van, with its right-hand drive, sliding door, and Spartan interior, is a rolling testament to that philosophy. Moreover, the DJ5 story reflects the evolution of mail delivery itself. As postal services modernized and routes became more complex, vehicles like the DJ5 played a vital role in ensuring the reliable delivery of millions of letters and parcels. These vans were the unsung heroes of American neighborhoods, quietly and efficiently crisscrossing streets day after day, rain or shine, with mail carriers who relied on them implicitly. Today, the DJ5 has found a new life in automotive museums, private collections, and vintage car shows. Enthusiasts cherish it not only for its rarity, but for its sheer individuality and the nostalgic charm it exudes. It stands as an emblem of quirky American design innovation, a vehicle built without compromise for a specialized task, boldly different and unapologetically functional. Driving or even just seeing a 1974 Jeep DJ5 postal van reminds us of the fascinating crossroads where utility meets eccentricity, where everyday work meets mechanical oddity, and where history rolls quietly along the suburban streets, one mailbox at a time.
The 1975 Sebring Vanguard city car stands as one of the most fascinating and peculiar symbols of 1970s America, a time when the country was grappling with the consequences of the oil embargo, skyrocketing fuel prices, and a newfound awareness of energy conservation. Born from a convergence of necessity, innovation, and sheer audacity, the city car was the product of Sebring Vanguard, a small American company that sought to revolutionize personal transportation by creating an affordable, lightweight, electric vehicle designed specifically for short-distance urban commuting. What emerged was a vehicle so unique, so unconventional, that it seemed to exist in a realm all its own, part car, part golf cart, and part quirky cultural artifact that encapsulated the hopes and frustrations of its time. The genesis of the city car was rooted in the 1973 oil crisis, which exposed America's heavy reliance on gasoline and forced many consumers to rethink their driving habits. Gasoline prices soared, and suddenly the massive, fuel-thirsty sedans and muscle cars that had defined the post-war era seemed anachronistic and impractical. Amid this turmoil, the idea of a small, nimble, battery-powered car began to gain traction. Sebring Vanguard's answer was the city car, a radically minimalist, wedge-shaped vehicle that looked as if it had been plucked from the pages of a sci-fi comic book or an avant-garde art installation. At first glance, the city car's appearance was strikingly simple, yet instantly recognizable. The sharply angled aerodynamic wedge body was constructed entirely from ABS plastic, a lightweight and inexpensive material that reduced weight, but also compromised durability. This made the car incredibly light, roughly 1,100 pounds, so much so that owners often joked about how a strong gust of wind could nudge it sideways on the road. The plastic body, painted in bright, candy-like colors, gleamed under sunlight, but was vulnerable to cracks and fading. Its small size meant it was incredibly maneuverable in tight urban settings, but offered almost no protection or insulation from the elements. Mechanically, the city car was powered by a modest 2.5 horsepower electric motor fueled by 6 6-volt lead-acid batteries, giving it a top speed of just about 38 miles per hour and a maximum range of roughly 40 miles on a single charge. These specs might seem laughable today, but back then they were revolutionary for a mass-produced electric vehicle. Still, the performance was painfully limited. Acceleration was sluggish, the suspension rudimentary, and the brakes simple drum units barely adequate for even urban driving. The car's steering was light, but imprecise, and its handling demanded respect from drivers used to heavier, more stable machines. The interior reflected the city car's minimalist ethos as well. Barely enough space for 2 occupants squeezed side by side on basic vinyl seats. The dashboard was a no-frills affair with only essential gauges such as a speedometer and battery charge indicator, no radio or air conditioning, and little in the way of comfort or refinement. Noise and road vibration were constants, making it clear that this car was not about luxury or prestige, but about functional, practical transportation for a very specific niche. Despite its obvious shortcomings, the city car was an ambitious and earnest attempt to carve out a new automotive category. Between 1974 and 1977, approximately 4,300 units rolled out of Sebring Vanguard's small Florida factory, a modest production run that made the city car one of the most produced electric vehicles of the pre-modern EV era. It attracted a curious mix of buyers: environmentalists eager for a pollution-free commute, urban dwellers frustrated by rising gas prices, and collectors drawn by its futuristic design and rarity. However, the city car's Achilles heel was its fragility and impracticality. Owners quickly learned that the plastic body was prone to cracking, that the lead-acid batteries required constant maintenance, and that the car was hopeless on highways or steep hills. Its slow speed was a safety concern on busy streets, and the lack of weatherproofing made it a poor choice in rain or cold. Many owners fondly recall the car's quirks, such as the tendency for the doors to rattle, the accelerator's slow response, or the need to park on flat surfaces to avoid battery drainage, but then the frustration when a gust of wind literally pushed them off their line. Yet, this idiosyncrasy became part of the charm, giving the city car a cult status among enthusiasts who treasured it as a symbol of an era's creativity and crisis. In cultural terms, the city car occupies a fascinating space as both a practical solution and an object of whimsy. Its appearance in neighborhoods was often met with raised eyebrows, laughter, and affection. It was not uncommon to see one lumbering down the street while pedestrians stopped and stared, some bewildered, others delighted by this tiny electric oddity. Its design has been described as a wedge-shaped golf cart, a spaceship gone small, or a bubble of plastic on wheels. Owners often joke that driving a city car was less about getting somewhere fast and more about making a statement that, yes, they cared about energy, innovation, and maybe a bit of standing out. Looking back, the city car was both a product of its time and a harbinger of things to come. It embodied the challenges of creating electric vehicles before the advent of modern battery technology and infrastructure. It showed the limits of early EV engineering, but also planted seeds of inspiration for future developments in sustainable transportation.
While it never achieved mass-market success or changed the automotive landscape overnight, its legacy endures in the hearts of collectors, historians, and EV pioneers who see in it a bold experiment, a quirky symbol of innovation, and a charming, if flawed, milestone on the road to cleaner mobility. Today, surviving city cars are rare treasures, carefully maintained and proudly displayed at car shows, museums, and EV enthusiast gatherings. They remind us of a time when the future looked uncertain, but full of possibilities. A time when inventors and dreamers dared to imagine a world where cars might not need gasoline, where plastic and electricity could reshape our daily travels, and where even the smallest, slowest car could carry a big dream. The Sebring Vanguard city car, in all its wedge-shaped glory, stands as a testament to the power of invention amid crisis, the beauty of bold ideas, and the enduring human spirit to keep moving forward, even if only at 38 miles per hour.
The 1981 DeLorean DMC12 is one of those rare cars whose legend stretches far beyond its actual performance or engineering merits, largely thanks to its iconic role in the Back to the Future movies. Without the flux capacitor and time travel gimmicks, the DMC12 stands as a fascinating but flawed automotive oddity. A stainless steel wedge with gull-wing doors that, at launch, promised futuristic design and exotic appeal, but delivered a rather underwhelming driving experience. Designed by Giorgetto Giugiaro, one of the most celebrated car designers of the 20th century, the DeLorean was visually striking from every angle. Its brushed stainless steel panels were a radical departure from the painted finishes of the era, giving it a cold, industrial look, reminiscent of a sleek refrigerator or a spacecraft. The surface was unique and eye-catching, but came with practical problems. Fingerprints and smudges were impossible to hide, and minor dents or scratches couldn't be easily repaired or repainted, which meant owners had to live with every blemish. The gull-wing doors added another layer of drama and futuristic flair, folding upwards with hydraulic assistance and instantly turning heads wherever the car went. Under the hood, however, the magic faded quickly. The DMC12 was powered by a 2.85-liter V6 engine sourced from Peugeot, Renault, Volvo, producing a modest 130 horsepower, far from the thrilling performance one might expect from such an exotic-looking car. Its acceleration was leisurely at best, and the handling, while decent, couldn't compete with true sports cars of the early 1980s. Enthusiasts and early buyers often lamented that the car's looks promised so much more than the driving experience delivered. One early owner famously said, "It was the coolest car I ever owned, and the slowest sports car I ever owned," a sentiment echoed by many who hoped for Ferrari-like speed, but got something closer to a Grand Touring's pace. The DeLorean's production story was equally tumultuous. John DeLorean, a charismatic but controversial figure, poured everything into making this dream car a reality. Production was based in a factory in Northern Ireland, funded in part by British government loans intended to create jobs in a troubled region. Unfortunately, the factory suffered from delays, quality control issues, and supply chain problems that pushed back deliveries and frustrated customers. Early units often arrived with missing or faulty parts, and build quality was inconsistent. Electrical glitches, rattles, and fit and finish issues plagued owners. Compounding these struggles, John DeLorean's high-profile legal troubles in the early 1980s, including a highly publicized drug trafficking sting from which he was acquitted, devastated the company's reputation and investor confidence. The firm declared bankruptcy in 1982, ending production after just about 9,000 cars were built over 2 years. Despite these flaws and failures, the DeLorean's enduring appeal lies in its bold, unconventional spirit and timeless design. Its stainless steel body and gull-wing doors were decades ahead of their time and have never really been matched in mass-produced cars. Its association with Back to the Future transformed it into a cultural icon, making it one of the most recognizable cars ever made. For collectors, it's a fascinating piece of automotive history, a car that combined radical design, high hopes, and dramatic off-track stories into a unique package. Driving a DeLorean today is an experience filled with contradictions. You get the admiring glances and nostalgic respect for the car's daring design, yet you also experience its quirks, the creaks of its gull-wing doors, the heft of its stainless steel shell, and the humble grunt of its V6 engine. It's a car that defies expectations. Neither a supercar nor a classic luxury cruiser, but something entirely its own. A symbol of ambition and imperfection, a steel-clad dream that, despite everything, continues to capture imaginations around the world.
The 1986 Zimmer Quicksilver is an automotive curiosity that perfectly captures the spirit of 1980s excess, blending a retro classical design language with the mechanical underpinnings of a modern mid-engine sports car. At its core, the Quicksilver is an audacious experiment in contrasts, a car that sought to combine the opulence and drama of 1930s luxury automobiles with the futuristic mid-engine layout of the Pontiac Fiero, one of GM's sportier compact cars of that era. The result was an eye-catching yet perplexing creation that remains a fascinating footnote in automotive history. Zimmer Motor Cars, a small American coach-building company known for its neoclassic vehicles, aimed to carve out a niche for buyers who longed for the glamour and elegance of vintage automobiles but wanted modern performance and conveniences. The Quicksilver's design team took the Pontiac Fiero's relatively tiny, lightweight chassis and transplanted it beneath a dramatically extended body. The front end, now dominated by an elongated hood, features exaggerated curves, sweeping chrome bumpers, and large, ornate headlights framed by gleaming grills reminiscent of classic Duesenbergs or Packards. Opera windows, chrome trim strips, and long sweeping fenders add to the visual drama, creating a presence that is part vintage aristocrat, part futuristic concept car. But the car's proportions tell a story of wild ambition and the challenges of blending two very different automotive philosophies. The Fiero's compact mid-engine layout meant the engine and transmission sat behind the seats, which limited how much Zimmer could extend the nose for the sake of aesthetics. This imbalance gives the Quicksilver a distinctive but slightly awkward look, a long, stately front that seems almost theatrical, perched atop a short, squat midsection and stubby rear overhang. This disparity sometimes makes it appear like a fusion of two cars, an old-world luxury coupe grafted awkwardly onto a modern sports car chassis. Beneath the flamboyant bodywork, the Quicksilver retains much of the Fiero's mechanical setup, including the independent suspension and mid-mounted engine, most commonly a V6, which provides decent handling and spirited performance for its class. While not a true sports car by hardcore enthusiast standards, the Quicksilver's chassis offers a surprising level of agility and responsiveness given its bulky coach-built exterior. Owners have praised the car's relative comfort and drivability, especially compared to other coach-built vehicles, which often sacrifice modern performance for looks. The Quicksilver's interior continued the theme of vintage luxury with wood veneer accents, plush leather seats, and analog gauges styled to evoke the grandeur of the 1930s. Yet, it still retained 1980s conveniences like air conditioning and power accessories, creating a curious blend of old-world charm and contemporary technology. This juxtaposition added to the car's appeal as a luxury novelty rather than a serious sports car or classic replica. Despite its unique charm, the Zimmer Quicksilver faced challenges common to coach-built niche cars: a limited production run, only a few hundred were made, high price relative to its mechanical basis, and a polarizing appearance that was too eccentric for mainstream buyers. Its oversized and unconventional proportions, while striking, prevented it from gaining widespread acceptance, relegating it to a cult classic status among collectors and enthusiasts of obscure automotive oddities. Today, the Quicksilver is a rare sight and an intriguing conversation piece,
embodying the spirit of 1980s American automotive kitsch and creativity. It represents a fascinating chapter in the history of small, independent coach builders who dared to dream differently, blending nostalgia with innovation in ways that mainstream manufacturers wouldn't risk. Owners often describe the experience of driving a Quicksilver as uniquely rewarding, a head-turning, unapologetically bold statement on wheels that invites curiosity, admiration, and occasional bewilderment. In summary, the 1986 Zimmer Quicksilver stands as a testament to an era when car design was willing to take risks, break conventions, and fuse seemingly incompatible elements. It's a stunning, if imperfect, fusion of neoclassical elegance and modern engineering, a car that lives up to the paradoxical promise of being both timeless and a product of its time, an extravagant rolling sculpture that refuses to be forgotten.
The 1997 Plymouth Prowler is a car that, even decades later, sparks intense debate among automotive enthusiasts, collectors, and historians alike. When it first debuted, it was a spectacle, part art, part engineering oddity, part bold experiment that challenged the very conventions of American car design and manufacturing in the late 20th century. Born from Chrysler's revival of the Plymouth brand, the Prowler was their attempt to capture the imagination of a public hungry for something radically different, something that celebrated America's hot rod heritage but delivered it with a modern twist. Visually, the Prowler was nothing short of a rolling statement piece. Its design harkened back to the custom-built roadsters and hot rods of the 1930s and 40s, those open-wheeled machines that burned up dry lake beds in back roads. But instead of a typical steel body, Chrysler chose to use aluminum extensively for the Prowler's chassis and body panels, a bold engineering choice at a time when aluminum was still largely confined to racing and exotic supercars. This helped keep the car's weight down to roughly 2,900 pounds, giving it a nimble feel that belied its striking proportions. The front wheels, sitting well outside the body on slender suspension arms, were a design masterstroke that both captivated and divided opinion. This open-wheel look made the car appear ready to leap forward at any moment, while also presenting unique engineering challenges. Ensuring stability, steering precision, and safety required advanced suspension tuning and design innovations. These exposed wheels became the Prowler's signature look, creating a visual identity that instantly distinguished it from anything else on the road, even today. However, despite this audacious design, the Prowler's heart was less revolutionary. It was powered by a 3.5-liter Mitsubishi-sourced V6, delivering a modest 253 horsepower. Respectable, but underwhelming for a car that looked like it belonged in a drag race. This engine was paired exclusively with a 4-speed automatic transmission, a choice that disappointed many potential buyers and purists who expected a manual gearbox for a car so steeped in performance and hot rod culture. The absence of a manual gearbox was a sticking point for those who craved more engagement behind the wheel and reflected Chrysler's conservative approach to market demands in the 1990s. Underneath the dramatic sheet metal, the Prowler featured a tubular space frame, advanced suspension geometry, and rear-wheel drive, all tailored to deliver a driving experience that was agile and fun, if not blisteringly fast. The suspension was designed to give the car sharp handling and a firm, responsive ride, and many owners praised its cornering capabilities despite the relatively modest powertrain. It was a lightweight roadster that could hustle through corners with surprising agility, thanks in large part to its minimal weight and low center of gravity. The interior of the Prowler was a mix of retro and modern cues, simple gauges with a vintage font, a minimalist dashboard, and bucket seats upholstered in leather. Unlike the flamboyant exterior, the cabin was relatively restrained, focusing on driver comfort and usability. However, some criticized the interior for being too sparse and lacking the refinement expected from a car priced above many typical sports cars of the era.
The Plymouth Prowler's production span from 1997 to 2002 yielded roughly 11,500 units, a small number compared to mainstream models, but enough to secure a lasting presence among collectors. It became one of the last unique offerings from the Plymouth brand before Chrysler discontinued the nameplate, marking the end of an era for an automaker that had, for decades, produced some of America's most beloved and accessible vehicles. Despite its quirks and compromises, the Prowler's legacy endures because it dared to be wildly different during a decade when automotive design often favored safe, incremental changes. It wasn't designed to be a muscle car, nor a high-performance sports car in the traditional sense. Instead, it was a rolling homage to the hot rod culture, translated through the lens of 1990s technology and style. Some loved it for its unapologetic uniqueness and fearless design. Others dismissed it as a flashy but ultimately impractical novelty, a car that looked great but lacked the soul of a true driver's machine. Collectors today prize the Prowler not just for its rarity, but for its bold character, a car that makes no apologies for standing out in any crowd. It embodies a moment in automotive history when Detroit wasn't afraid to reach into the past to inspire the future, even if that future didn't quite live up to expectations. The Prowler remains a testament to creativity, risk-taking, and the enduring allure of American automotive individuality, an icon that continues to turn heads and spark conversations long after production ended.
The 2004 Chevrolet SSR stands as one of the most fascinating and unconventional experiments in modern American automotive history, a vehicle that defied categorization from the very beginning. It was a daring fusion of several automotive worlds: a pickup truck, a convertible roadster, and a retro-styled hot rod. This unusual mix made it an immediate head-turner, a love-it-or-hate-it machine that embodied both the bold creativity and the marketing risks of early 2000s Detroit. Chevrolet, seeking to revive nostalgic charm while tapping into the growing market for lifestyle vehicles, went back to the drawing board with a concept that recalled the iconic trucks of the late 1940s and early 1950s. The SSR, which stands for Super Sport Roadster, was designed to bring back the classic styling cues: rounded fenders, sweeping body lines, prominent front grille, but wrapped in modern engineering and features. It looked like a gleaming, polished relic unearthed from a post-war showroom, yet it was brand new, born of 21st century technology. Its body was a bold statement: voluptuous curves, a high belt line, and a massive front grille that gave it a muscular yet elegant stance. The paint was glossy and vibrant, usually in bright colors like torch red or victory red, emphasizing the SSR's flamboyant personality. The dramatic piece that really set the SSR apart was its retractable hardtop convertible roof, a marvel of engineering that folded neatly behind the cabin, transforming the truck into an open-air cruiser. This feature was extraordinary because it had never been seen on a pickup before. Blending the idea of a convertible with a truck bed was daring and unprecedented. However, this mechanical complexity also meant the bed space was limited, and the added weight from the folding mechanism compromised some of the utility and performance that pickup buyers expected. Underneath the eye-catching exterior, the SSR's chassis and drivetrain borrowed heavily from Chevrolet's GMT platform, the same underlying frame used by the Trailblazer SUV and the Pontiac GTO Coupe. This meant the SSR had a strong, sturdy frame, rear-wheel drive, and decent suspension tuning that gave it more engaging handling than many trucks of the time. Power came from a 5.3-liter V8, producing about 300 horsepower and 320 pound-feet of torque, plenty to move the SSR's roughly 4,300-pound frame. Buyers could choose between a 4-speed automatic or, for the purists, a rare 6-speed manual gearbox, giving the SSR a sporty edge that few trucks could claim. Despite this, the SSR was plagued by identity issues. It wasn't quite a practical pickup. Its bed was small and cramped due to the convertible mechanism, making it unsuitable for hauling large loads or towing heavy trailers.
It wasn't a pure sports car either. Its weight and bulk meant it couldn't match the nimble handling of dedicated roadsters or coupes. Furthermore, its price tag, which hovered around $42,000 new, was steep compared to other pickups in sports cars, leaving buyers confused about what the SSR was truly meant to be. Sales numbers reflected this confusion. Over its 4-year production run, 2003 to 2006, Chevrolet built just under 24,000 SSRs, making it relatively rare on American roads. Dealers often struggled to sell them, and many units sat on lots unsold for months. Critics panned it as a curious styling exercise that lacked clear purpose, while enthusiasts admired it for its boldness and uniqueness. The SSR attracted a niche following, owners who cherished its retro flair and loved that it stood out like no other vehicle on the road. Inside, the SSR featured a leather-trimmed cabin with retro-modern touches, chrome trim accents, large analog gauges with classic fonts, and a simple yet stylish dashboard layout. The seats were comfortable, with bolstering that hinted at its sporty intentions, but overall the interior was more about style than luxury. Tech amenities were basic by today's standards, but included power windows, a premium sound system, and climate control to keep occupants comfortable, whether under the sun or behind the roof. Anecdotes from owners often highlight the paradoxical nature of the SSR. It looks like a hot rod, but you don't want to load dirt into the bed. The doors are heavy, the roof's a marvel, but driving it turns heads everywhere. People ask if it's a Corvette with a bed. I say it's a Corvette with an attitude problem. This duality, part muscle car, part pickup, part convertible novelty, made it beloved by those who valued style and statement over practicality. In retrospect, the Chevrolet SSR embodies an era when Detroit was willing to take bold risks, blurring lines and challenging conventions. It is a rolling piece of automotive theater, a statement that vehicles don't have to fit neatly into boxes, that they can be playful, nostalgic, and technically innovative all at once. While it never became a commercial success or a mass-market favorite, the SSR's enduring charm lies in its audacity, its unapologetic strangeness, and its celebration of automotive individuality. Today, the SSR is a cult classic, a sought-after collector's item for those who want something out of the ordinary, something that commands attention and sparks conversation wherever it goes. It's a time capsule of early 2000s design daring, a quirky fusion of past and future, and a reminder that sometimes the best cars are the ones that don't quite fit any mold, but instead carve their own unique place in automotive history.